We are being live streamed. Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday and welcome to the Sisters Interview. I was going to say the date, but I'm not sure what day it is.
It's the 18th.
Wednesday, August 18th. Tonight our guest is a second generation STA Escadian. I'm not sure how to term that. Rotrude, Halfblind. She well, we'll have you tell it. How did you start out in the STA?
Like I said, I'm second generation. My mom found the SCA in 1989, and I was 4 or 5 at the time. And she sort of jumped in with both feet, and and brought us kids along. I'm the oldest of 3, so she was there with 3 children under 5, which now just absolutely blows my mind that anyone would ever attempt such a thing, but she did. And and I've been here ever since, with a bit of a hiatus in my college years, which we'll talk about, I'm sure. And now I bring my family, but I only have one child. So it's a little bit less of a overwhelming event, I suppose. I do, like you said, I do a lot of things, and perhaps we will talk about most of them.
So, your mom is an incredible artist and researcher, and is not super active anymore due to health reasons, but has been really active in the past.
Yeah, she's still quite active, in the ways that she can be active, which is she has done for years a lot online. And but yeah, she's had to take a step back from eventing due to health reasons, and that's been really hard for her and for all of us, I think.
I didn't mean to make this about her. I'm sorry.
No. I mean, that's where we start, right?
What I was sort of trying to get at was, as a child, you grow up in the SCA and you just kind of are going because your mom's going. At what point did that sort of transition into, was it something you always enjoyed, or did it transition at some point to your thing and not her thing?
Yeah, that's a great way to put that. I mean, one of my first memories of when I was 5 or 6 is of my mom winning a contest with a piece of garb that she made me. It was a pink sort of side-laced Bliot style, and it had like a purpley blue lozenge or diamond pattern on the bottom, and I loved it. I felt like a princess, and it was so great, and I was so proud of my mom as she won this costume contest, and I got to tell everybody that my mom won this contest. And then I kept that that piece of garb went to Gold Key eventually, and I would keep seeing it every couple of years. Like, it would just like wander by on some little kid and be like, I remember. So that was really delightful for me. So it is always been a thing that I've enjoyed. I liked dressing up. I liked doing the things. And then you've got kids, so you understand there's a rough patch sort of in the preteen, early teen years, when there's this really terrible sort of age gap where you're too old for most of the kid activities, but you're too young for any of the adult activities. And and so if you don't find some reason, then it just becomes this terrible thing. And the reason that I stuck around was that I sort of slowly brought some of my friends along. I was 13, 14, and we'll see a bunch of them in these pictures that I've sent, because they still show up to events just to hang out with me. Bless their hearts. And not in the sarcastic way, I really do love them. So yeah, I remember in 7th grade distinctly, I see my friend Kelly has a fantasy book. I believe it was the Sword of Shannara or something like that. And I'm like, oh, you're into medievally things. Hey, there's this this weird thing that my family does that you might enjoy. So I drove, I dragged Kelly along with me to an event, and we sort of eventually dragged, kind of one by one, a whole group of us. And so then, for me, being a extremely awkward 13-year-old, with a weird disability and being skinny and poor, like, it was really wonderful and refreshing for me to have a thing that I could be sort of the leader in. And, this was my world in a way. And, so I stuck with it through all of my teenage years, all the way up until I went to college, because it was a thing that I could be a little bit of a big fish in the pond, and it was really fun. And we did so much camping together, and, and it was a different time then, in the late 90s. So we got away with things now that I don't know that modern day teenagers would get away with, as far as camping by ourselves and sort of supervising our own selves. But and this sort of leads into another rant, in that I had this reputation of being a good kid because I didn't bother anybody, which meant that I kind of did whatever I wanted. So, turns out, if you don't bother the grown-ups and get into trouble, you get to have your own kitchen and cook over a fire. And there was at one point I was at an event and my mom wasn't there, and so I had a paperwork guardian, and I asked him hey, can you bring me a bottle of wine? And he's like, why? I'm like, well, I want to make this period recipe. It's called beef stewed, and I need to pour a bottle of wine over it, and then I add raisins. It was to cook with. And so, totally nonplussed, this fellow brings me a bottle of red wine and watches me pour it over my beef and then cook the beef. And I'm like, okay, thanks. Like, it was just, because I wasn't drinking the alcohol. I legit wanted to make this recipe. That's the kind of nerd I was, everybody. And so, so it really was my thing all through my teenage years. And then I went off to college. And I didn't really do much during my college years because I was busy super focusing on my studies, and I was often busy in the summers working. And so I'd make 1 or 2 events a year. And then when I finished with college, I went off and lived in faraway New York City, and I spent 6 years there. And again, I went even less. I went to maybe an event every couple of years at that point, because I was busy being in my 20s and living in New York City and living that life. And then I got married. I met my husband, and I took him to an event in the Shire of Andubagin, in the Kingdom of the East, and that was the only event I went out there, which I sort of regret. I wish I'd gotten up the courage to go to the dance practice in Central Park, but I never did. So I took him to an event out there, and I was like, hey, this is this nerdy thing that my family does, and see if he's enjoyed himself. And then when we moved, we decided to move back here to Seattle. He's an acupuncturist, and he was looking for places that he could find acupuncturist jobs, and Seattle came up. And I'm like, well, I went to college there, so I kind of know my way around, and it's a really beautiful city, so let's move there. So we did. And then we got here, and we spent 6 months or a year kind of settling ourselves. And my husband says, I'm really bored. I really need a social life, and I want to have regular ways to meet people, and trivia night was at the bar wasn't cutting it. And I'm like, well, have I got a hobby for you? And so we started going to fight practices and craft nights, and then we started. I took him to an Eggles, and I'm going to talk all about Eggles later because it's my absolute favorite. And I took him to the Eggles, and he won an axe throwing contest, and he was hooked, as far as like, hey, this is a fun thing that we can do together, as a couple, and then eventually as a family. So, my super nerdy teenage hobby became my family hobby. And I guess all it took was that I had to leave for 10 years and come back. So that's sort of my story there.
Awesome. And you, I can see all of your leather bags behind you. How did you get into doing that work? Have you been doing that since you were a teenager or?
No, no, this is by accident. This is super recent, like 2018 recent. Uh, so when I came back, we, I was sort of feeling out, like, hey, what are people here around here into? Like, is this like a super Norse group or super, this, that, or the other thing? I'm like, oh, a lot of people in this area do 15th century. And I'm like, well, I've always kind of been interested in that time period and era. And there's lots of really beautiful resources to look through. And they're starting to get things like oil painting, which means more detailed pictures of things like scene treatments and all of that. So I'm like, oh, this is a cool time period. All right. There's no shame, I think, in sort of sussing out what people are into around you and kind of going with the flow of it. I think, because it makes some things a lot easier, but also, like, there's so much out there. There's just so much that so many rabbit holes to go down. And sometimes what you need is some way to point. And so I'm like, all right, cool. I'll start getting into 15th century things. And, I have to collect pictures and I'm doing the things. And then the reason I got into this is it's all Morgan Donner's fault. We'd sort of been seeing, pictures of these, extant leather cases popping up. And she's like, oh, I want to make one. I'm like, you know what? That's on my list to make too. And, we both had that on our list. And she's like, well, let's get together and do a craft day. And she sat down and watched some very long videos and kind of figured out the basic steps. I'm like, oh, awesome, sweet. Like I was kind of lost here too. And we sat down and we made the first one. And this is my first one. There's a picture of it there. And then, and she, we finish it up and she looks at me from across the table and she says, I'm happy. I'm finished. I never need to do this again. And I'm like, I do. Because not that I wasn't happy with the first one, but I was like, I want to get good at making these, because this one feels very sort of rudimentary and crude. And like, I see some of the extant examples are just really beautiful. And it's also becomes one of those things that, like, as soon as you start looking for a thing, you suddenly start seeing them everywhere. Turns out every museum from here to across the planet has some of these. If they have a medieval exhibit, they're very common, and they're usually called etui, which is the French word for case. So that's not very descriptive, but leather etui, and they're some of them have visible stitches, but most of them do not. And so they're this kind of complicated, skived and layered and laminated together thing. And I start making them and I start churning them out, and I made more and more and more of them. And before I knew it, suddenly this is my thing. This is the thing that Rotrude does. So I still feel kind of like I stumbled into it. I didn't go looking for a place to focus, and I found one. So and I kind of feel like that's really wonderful that I just started out just doing some sort of general costume things, and like, oh, I'm gonna make all the garb, I'm gonna try out different time periods. I mean, I still will, but like right now this is where I'm at. This is the thing I'm really focused on. So yeah, I'm and the more I work on them, the more in awe I am of the original artists and the original, just some of them are just masterworks of craft, and some of them are really crude, like they're made by the apprentice and he just needs to knock it out and get it done. And I love that there's such a broad scope for how simple and how complicated these things can be.
It's really cool. I love it when people happen upon a passion like that.
Yeah, I fell into it, and I had very little leatherwork experience beforehand. I'd made a couple of pairs of shoes, so I knew about the pointy needle, and that was it. And so I'm relatively certain that when I get to finally teaching an in-person class, I'm going to get a leather worker like who is actually familiar with leather, and they're going to be horrified at all the weird things I do, because I had no no sort of background, and I was really starting from scratch and reinventing the wheel. And yet I kind of feel like to a certain extent there is an advantage, because then I'm able to not have any preconceptions of how, oh, this is how this ought to be done, because this is how a modern leather worker would do it. Well, I'm not a modern leather worker. I don't know how a modern leather worker would do it. I look at the piece and I say, well, it looks like it's 3 layers. So that's what I'm going to do. So,
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, and you also mentioned going to fight practices, and that's one of your things as well. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
I when my husband and I first moved out here, I thought, my husband might be interested in fighting. He's, kind of a, an on-tier medium, as they say, kind of a what a normal person would consider a bigger guy, but and and he's got kind of a calm, kind of philosophical demeanor. I thought, he might do really well at it. And and I've been curious about fighting for a while. Well, actually, since I was a teenager, but then I moved away and off to college, and I didn't pick up fighting then, because it was just, I didn't need another time sink of a hobby. And I also had a lot of fear and a lot of trepidation about, being a petite woman with a weird disability. And in retrospect, like, I sometimes wish, like, oh man, if I'd started younger, I'd be 10 years ahead of where I am now. But at the same time, I don't know that the fighting community would have been ready for me if I'd started 10 years before. So maybe it worked out for the best. But anyway, it was 2013, September 2013. And I bring my husband to a fight practice, and I tell the person there who it was Sir Payne. He was Sir Payne at the time. He's not anymore. But I say, hey, if I'd kind of like to try it too. And he said, oh, sure, I'll bring some armor for you as well. And he had a kit that was sort of approximately my size, because his wife also fought. And so my husband and I go out there in our cobbled together kit. We've got a picture of that in the pictures too. And it turns out my husband was really ambivalent about fighting. He didn't really enjoy hitting, and he didn't really enjoy getting hit. And it just, it didn't set a spark for him. And it did for me. And I said, oh my gosh, I love this. And so here we are. I'm now the fighter in the household. As incongruous as it might look from the outside, that the big muscly ex-athlete power lifter man is not the fighter, it's me. So but I loved it. I did from that first night. I really enjoyed what it did for my brain. I enjoyed the thought process of it. I loved feeling like I was working at something that had previously been really scary for me. So, I was facing some fears, and also I love armor. Armor is great. Armor protects me. Armor helps me do things that I might not otherwise have the courage to do. So, and that sort of, I sort of knew that about myself already, and when I was a kid just doing boffers, I had discovered fairly, when I was in my early teens, that if I wore goggles, I was fearless, because I wasn't scared of getting hit in the eye. And so likewise, when I put on a helmet, I'm like, okay, I'm all right. They're not going to hit me in the eye. Incidentally, that's why I don't do rapier, because those little tiny swords could hit me in the eye. I don't like that. It makes me want to pee and run away. So
you've mentioned a couple times that you have an odd disability, and for people that don't know you, can you explain what that is?
Oh yeah. I guess I should have opened this. Yeah, I am blind on my right side. That's why the half blind. And it's from birth. I've always been this way. When I was born, I was a sickly premature infant, and I had a cataract in that eye. And at the time, the way that they dealt with the cataract was to pull out the lens completely. And it was 1984, and I was a premature infant, and the surgery to replace the lens would not come along for several more years. And so they never put anything back in. They tried to contact for a while and it was terrible. It fell out into and I ate it with my Cheerios. So that was a no-go. And so I've just always been blind on that side. I can see like movement and color, but it's very much weaker than the other eye in all ways. And the reason I wear an eye patch sometimes and sometimes not is that the bad eye is very sensitive to UV rays. So black lights, painful, but sunlight also just, so if I discovered again, when I was a young teen, that when I would go outside in the summer, I could either put on big glasses or I would just squint all the time. And then I got tension headaches and tension headaches aren't very fun. So I patch it up when I'm at events because it's just better. And then when the sun goes down, I can tear that patch off because it's itchy after 8 hours. Oh my God, it's terrible. And then obviously in indoor events where it's not sunshine right on my face, I don't have to wear it. So.
How has that affected your learning process with fighting?
It's really hard to tell because again, I've always been like this. So, and there's definitely, sometimes I'll get somebody explaining something to me and I'll have to stop them and be like, I can't actually, do that thing because then I blind myself, or like, there's a movement thing that like is extra difficult for me. As far as like range and distance, again, I was born this way. So, I've just compensated for it all my life. And so, I don't know if I have it any better or worse in some ways, but the not seeing out one side can be trouble because I put my shield up. It's a thing I'm working on right now, is ways to look around the shield or not look around the shield if I don't have to, because I blinded myself. But I'm not the first fighter who's been blind in one eye, and I certainly won't be the last. And it's just everybody's got, they inhabit their own body, and we all have to work with what we've got. So that's what I've got. It has affected other parts of my life. I have only recently learned how to drive, and a part of that was the big fear of, I can't see out my right side, and it's really scary. And so it took me 35 years to to kind of get over that and get behind the wheel of a car. And I finally did, and I'm so grateful that I was able to. But because I went to see a doctor when I was living in New York, and to see if she could do the second half of the cataract surgery and fix my eye, because I'd sort of like had it in my head that like I can start doing some of the things I want to do that I don't want to do yet because of my eye, if I get my eye fixed. And so I was like, I could do some SCA heavy fighting and I can learn to drive, but I went to see this doctor and she informed me that she says I could do the second half of the surgery, but you will always have double vision because the way that the eyes track together sort of cements itself in your brain at about 7 or 8. And she's like, if we do, just like, it's like correcting a lazy eye, you have to do it before puberty, otherwise you can't. And so, I cried on the subway on the way home, and because now this sort of golden hope that I'd had that someday I'd be able to fix the eye, I wouldn't be able to. And so then I had to go through the whole mental process of like, well, now that I know that I can't fix the eye, should it still stop me from doing these things that I want to do? And the doctor, in fact, informed me that like, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to learn to drive. And I'm like, well, I'm not ready. It's really scary. And she's like, well, that's a reason, but it's not the physical reason. And it took me another 5 to 7 years after that before I got behind the wheel of a car, because that mental block was a lot harder than the physical, turns out. So when I started fighting, like I was like, well, here I am. And by then it had been a couple of years and I've sort of accepted that this is never going to change and I'm going to just kind of have to learn to work around it. And that sucks, but it's really fun to fight. That made it worth it to me. So.
Very cool.
Are you more of a tournament or more of a melee fighter?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I live in Ontario, so tournament by default.
That's the truth.
I mean, I do like melee fighting. So I like fighting in wars, but it is a completely different experience. And I don't feel as useful on the war field as I do fighting tournaments because, you know, can't. Like I determined fairly early on that like the only place I'm going to be any good on the war field really is command, because like I don't got the you know, I'm not good with the range or the poking for pike because depth perception's hard. And you don't want to put me on a shield wall unless you absolutely have no choice because I just get red rovered right over. You know, but I'm like, all right, well, that just means that I need to have good battlefield awareness and know and there's no really good way to get good at fighting wars other than to fight more wars. So I get on a field and I have a good time and I never feel like a hero, but that's all right. I'm mostly there to hang out with my friends. And I do enjoy the camaraderie and the you know, the hanging out and the you know, the wearing all the same thing and feeling like you're part of a whole. It's really satisfying. But it's very different from tournament fighting, which is very much like a here and the now and the you and the them, and it does completely different things for my brain. So no judgments at all for anyone who prefers one to the other because they're absolutely very different.
So are you mostly a sword and shield?
Yeah, the default to sword and board. I realize and I have plans to learn some other weapons forms, but when I first started out, I was like, I want to get good with the default form, which is a heater, shield, and sword. You know, why, you know, if it's not broke, don't fix it, I guess. It's like, you know, I think there's something to be said for treading on a well-traveled path for a while, especially when you already have parts of the path that are harder. You know, I every once in a while I'll pick up a you know, a two-hander sword or a glaive or something, and I just don't feel it. Although I did recently acquire a hammer, like a two-handed hammer, and that felt really good. So I think I'm gonna try that next. But no, it's sword and board, it's bread and butter, meat and potatoes, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, man. I really like it, and yeah, it's good, feels good.
Well, do we want to look at some pictures?
Yeah, let's do. And get it to work.
Rivkin's going to do the photo sharing because my slideshow failed.
Computers. Here we are. Oh my gosh. So I'm about 8 or 9 here. That's me in the veil, by the way, with the cross and the I was on retinue for Berengaria, Rourke and Berengaria, but I was on the Queen's retinue, and because Berengaria was a friend of my mother's, and she has since she's passed away recently, and she's one of the missing faces that I will be sorely sad not to see when we meet for events in person again. But her arms have those snowflakes, and the snowflakes on her blio there, I cut out. I made that pattern. I was a big maker of snowflakes. My dad taught me how to cut 6-sided paper snowflakes when I was a wee child. And it became my thing. I kind of got obsessed with it. And so when my mom starts sewing for Berengaria's retinue and she needs snowflakes for the thing, that was me. And Berengaria loved it. The people who had to applique them did not love them. But Berengaria, you know, I was 8, man, and so like there are a couple that were like accidental, like Star Trek logos, more than one that was probably an accidental phallic symbol. And it was yeah. And I think that is one of my first and only experience with a royal retinue. Retinue is not really a thing that I do, but I really enjoyed it when I was 8 or 9. I don't remember. Oh, and the gown that I'm wearing actually was my mother's, and it was wool, and it got shrunk in the wash, and so that's why it's on me. So it no longer fit mom, it fit me, and she's still mad.
Aw, is she in here as well?
She's not in this picture. No, I'm not sure I have any pictures of her. At least not from this age. She generally hates how she photographs, so I try to avoid putting anything that she would find unflattering on here.
Sweet.
Yeah. This is me. I think I'm 10 or 11 here. I loved that tunic, and I loved throwing a straw hat around like a frisbee. This is in the Summits. I'm from, when I was growing up, we lived in Adiantum, which is Eugene, Oregon. And so that's sort of my hometown. And I think this event was like a Briar Oak Bash or something in Southern Oregon, where there are oak trees and beautiful scenery and not a lot else.
So has Eagles always been your favorite event then, since you grew up down there?
Yeah. It's sort of my hometown touchstone. I still go every year when we can. Like I said, I took my husband there. Oh, there I am. Oh, I'm so cute. I still have bangs. This outfit, this is another sort of, I remember one time I was wearing the undergown and like a little coif, and I'd been charged to do some dog sitting. So I was watching somebody else's dog, and I'm wandering around my little coif and tunic, and somebody, like, I walk by somebody and they say, "Oh, you look just like the pictures." And that just like warmed my little heart so much. And I went home and I told my mom, somebody said that I look just like the pictures, and she was also like super excited about that. So it was that was a pretty good memory for me. Like, you know, that's like the ultimate compliment, that you look like you walked out of a manuscript. Oh, feels good.
Take it.
Oops, I just messed that up. I'm sorry. I'm going to stop sharing so I can figure out what I just did. Oops. So keep talking about Eagles.
Oh yeah, Eagles. Yeah, it's been my favorite. You know, it used to be at a different site, but when I was probably 13 or 14, they moved it to the current site that it has been since. A beautiful Lynx Hollow State Park. And I guess there was some deal with the state, the Parks Department, where if we went in and cleared all the blackberries, we could use the site every year. And so I actually clocked in some of my high school requirement community service hours by going out there with a machete and killing blackberries. And I did that several years in a row, because, you know, also at the time, this was before Grand Thing and before the pirate events really became a thing. And so the Memorial Day weekend, there was not a whole lot else going on, and Eagles was giant, like 2,500 people just packed. And it was basically, if you couldn't get somebody out there to be part of a work party, it was really hard to get a campsite, because it was a real estate run. And so I'd go out there and I'd cut the blackberries and get my name on the list, and then me and my friends and my mom and whoever was camping with us would have a place to camp out at Eagles. So that was part of the deal. I think I love this picture. Oh, look at me. I think I'm 11 here. I believe I made that pouch that's hanging from my belt, like hand sewed. I've been like hand sewing myself little pouches and dollies and stuff since I was like 7. And my mom made this set of hobby horses. This one was named Turbo, from the Riders in the Sky radio show. Turbo the Wonder Horse. And we had a lot of fun running around with our hobby horses. I think I'm wearing socks with sandals there. Oh, that's adorable.
All right, let's see if it takes me to the right one. Is that the next one?
Uh, n-
No.
yeah, yes, but you want to go the other way. So
The other one.
No,
no.
no, I think this is.
Oh, this is it. Anyway, we'll talk about this picture. This is my 8th grade graduation, everybody. This is how nerdy and what a dork I was, guys. I'm wearing a Bleo to my 8th grade graduation. It was the nicest thing I owned. So there I am with
That
my.
is great.
It was the 90s. I had bangs.
All right. It keeps defaulting back. I can tell I'm not going to get to the right picture. So this sucks, but I'm going to scroll up and we're going to find it.
All right.
And sorry, Laurelyn, for posting your Facebook.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that. All right, 1, 2, 3.
I'm sure she'll forgive us.
Oh, no.
Okay, there we go.
Oh, technology. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, there I am. Okay, yeah, and then there's, yeah. And then the next, oh, that was
okay,
tiny.
that's the one.
Weird. Yeah, there I am. So this is me with my sister. That's the same Bleo. And this is a gown. Again, my mother made this for herself. And then as my sister and I sort of grew, we just started wearing all of her clothes.
Does your sister still play too?
No, she'll come to Eagles every once in a while with her little family, but not really.
I made my daughter a new outfit and I've worn it more than she has because so we're getting to that point as well.
I don't know why it keeps going back to your young ones, but
Should I try it maybe?
yeah, maybe.
Yeah, we'll try. It's not ideal, but we'll try it. All right.
Sorry, people, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties.
We're having it's technical difficulties night. Well,
We're gonna roll with it.
We're rolling with it. All right, now I will try to share my screen. There we go. All right. I'm not sure what you can see here, but this is a picture of me. I believe I'm 17 here. I'm trying to herald, and I'm not a very good herald.
So are you in the black tunic with the green?
With the green, yep, that's me with the green. I mostly remember butchering people's names. I can have a nice loud projected voice, but I was very nervous, and I remember particularly Tiernan before he was a Duke. He wasn't a Duke yet, but I remember just butchering his name every time and feeling so bad every time.
I'm sure he didn't care.
Oh, this is me again. I think I'm 16 or 17 here. I had a Frankish persona. I picked out the name Rotrude because she's one of Charlemagne's daughters. And I got really into the research on 9th century Franks. I spent most of my sophomore year in high school. Long story short, I had an independent study for my social studies credit. And so they basically left me alone in the library to do whatever I wanted. And this is a dream. And one of the things I studied was 9th century Franks and Charlemagne and everything in the world around. And so I picked the name Rotrude and I got really into it. And I made this gown that I'm wearing here. And I researched the patterns for, what sort of embroidery. It's just this plain, simple chain stitch embroidery. And I don't know that I've done any major embroidery since, but I was really into it for that 6 months. And the Frankish women wore a lot of veils, with lots of veils going on. So here I am. And I think my bangs are growing out there. That's why they're, and I'm talking to somebody, gesturing. But I won a costume contest with that gown, and I believe I am wearing a chemise made out of the silk that was the prize for that contest. And I actually still have the tunics that I made from that silk, because it was really special to me to be 17 and I won a contest for my clothing. It was really
Very
cool.
cool.
All right. All right, and we've seen these ones. So we're going to move on to the next folder, I think, because we're going to get into, I tried to put things in sort of like time order. So
Thank you for doing this.
yeah, I know it's a pain, but here we are. Okay, so this is that I'm now in my 20s and my college years. And like I said, I went to 1 or 2 events a year, and one of them was Eggles. And this is me at an Eggles with my cat. So this must be college years, because that's when I got the cat. Her name was Iso, and she was an excellent eventing kitty. And you can see I'm wearing sort of baggy, tunicky Frankish clothes. I think that was a tunic where that I made when I was having a brief foray into a male persona. His name was Ludovico, and he got to swagger around and wear a machete and feel important. But he felt like a costume, so I did not keep him up. So, and that was one thing I think I appreciated when I was a young person in the SCA, was that, like, not only was it accepted to sort of try out a new you, it was encouraged almost. And so yeah, and nobody blinked when I showed up and said I was a boy today. I'm wearing boy clothes. Call me Ludovico. All right. It lasted all of a day, and that's fine. Maybe, you know. Anyway, Isa was a great tourney cat. Here we are watching archery, because archery is a lot less noisy than heavy fighting, which she did not like.
I have to say, I think like bringing your cat with you is a total SCA thing. I had never seen anyone do that until I started playing in the SCA, and it totally is a thing.
It's the thing. Yeah. Isa was a good tourney cat. She was chill. Really, the key with a cat was that she was okay with riding in cars. If your cat won't ride in a car, it's a no-go. And no, she's chill. She'd just sit in my lap and look out the window and then eventually fall asleep. It's perfect.
And the ability to be on a leash is important as well.
Yeah. Well, and I trained her too for a leash. You know, when I got her as a tiny kitten, and I would make like little tiny yarn harnesses to put on her. You know, and then we would get to go outside in the hall where there were other people, and she was social, so she liked getting to go out to meet other people. And so that it became this, you know, hey, if you're willing to wear this thing, we get to, you know, do this fun social thing. And so, like, yeah, I trained her into it, which you can do with some cats, but not all, and that's fine.
My son desperately wants to walk our cat on a leash,
But
and
I don't really walk on a leash. It's a carry.
he flips out of it and like wiggles out of the.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Some cats just won't abide. Here I am falling asleep in the sunshine in my, as you can see, I got the eye patch and the veils and the multiple layers. Oh, this is me in my apartment in New York. And I was, like I said, I went to one event out in the East Kingdom, and this is me preparing for it by making my first like fitted kirtle. And there I am checking out the fit. And I was so proud of that thing, and it was so wonky. Oh yeah, there it is. I laced it too tight, so it was getting wrinkles, and the lacing hole. I'm terrible at eyelets. Eyelets are the worst, and like I just could not get them even, and so the neckline's all askew. It didn't matter. I was so proud because I had made something was fitted, and it wasn't a baggy, you know, tee. You know, I was expanding my horizons, and here we are.
I think you're the only person that notices any of the wonkiness.
So this is my group of friends, and this is an Eggles when we are in, this is college age. We are thoroughly in our 20s. Right next to me there is Edonia Sherwood, as she is known in the SCA. She is a she's a Laurel down in Three Mountains, and she's not in Three Mountains.
She's current Baroness
She's
of
current Baroness of
Dragons. No.
Dragon's Mist, I think. No? Anyway. Oh my God, I'm sorry, Miriam. I'm the worst friend. I don't remember what barony you're but behind her is my friend Kelly, who I mentioned before. And then with her is my friend Laura, and then our friend Brooke. And these are all women that I have known since I was in 7th or 8th grade, and still keep in touch with, and still see on a regular basis. And
was Adonia, she was a 2nd gen SCA person as well.
No, she I'm not sure the order of operations, but she got into the SCA around the same time that I did, and I don't know if I sort of led her into it or not, or if she found it on her own. She probably would have found it on her own if it hadn't been for me, because her mom was super into history, and then Adonia sort of brought her mom in. So like it wasn't a 2nd generation so much as the both of them kind of jumped in. Like I could be misremembering that, but I remember them getting into it about the same time. And then Miriam, Adonia sort of stuck with it, and so did her mom, and so she was a lot more active when I was back east. And so she so she's probably for a while there was probably known better than I was. Here we are. We're eating food. That's Kelly's little brother Connor. And that's me with Vesta. Hi, Vesta. This is a post glomp. There's a big squishy hug, which made my veils and circlet go askew, much to the delight and satisfaction of all.
That is a great hug when that happens.
Right?
Yeah.
Here Kelly and I are laughing at something. And oh yeah, this is me with Adonia, and I'm still not sure what year this picture is from.
It looks like a movie still.
Right, yeah. And I'm still wearing the baggy tunics, and I that was a fashion I did for a while, was the 4 braids, 2 in front and 2 in back. I don't know where that came from, but I always felt like I was like an ancient Celt or something wearing it. So felt cool. Also, it was not a style that I saw in the modern world at all, and I was like, I felt really cool that I got to feel extra medievally from this could have been made up thing. And
something about doing your hair different, and
right,
that sort of transports you, and I think that's important. Even if
and I'm big about ambiance, and I'm big into you dress the part so that you feel the part, and that took me into my professional career too, because I did theater costumes and sets professionally for that 10 years. And I always looked for that moment, sort of when the actor put on the clothes, and all of a sudden it became that much easier for them to inhabit that character. And I really believe in that magic. So we're going to get into my return. So
do you think the SCA influenced you into going into theater costuming? And
absolutely, I don't think there's any question of that. Because it was a thing I was good at. I was good at sewing and doing crafty things and making costume and creating world through objects. And theater was sort of a natural fit. I went to Cornish College of the Arts in their performance production department, because it was a department that was just the backstage stuff. I didn't have to act. I'm not an actor, everybody. And I got a degree in costume and set design, and then I went to New York, and I spent several years as a costume designer and a scenic painter, when I wasn't doing a terrible soul-sucking day job. But I don't know if I would have made that leap without the SCA to sort of teach me that I was good at this particular thing, because I wasn't into being on stage. So, I wasn't, I did a little bit of theater in high school, but not much. So, but I sure could make a costume.
One of the things that the SCA gives you is this ability to look at something and say, I can do that, because you see so many.
Yeah, absolutely. There's it's like, I can make that thing, or, like, or at least sort of have an idea of how it was made. And and sort of teaches us to work with our hands and make things, which, sometimes in the modern world is the things that gets lost, and I think we have a real human need for that. I think the popularity of things like knitting and other sort of handicrafts is because it's not that we need scarves and hats. We don't. We can buy them from China for a dime a dozen, literally, but like, we need to make things with our hands. And I think the SCA gives us, for me at least, gives me an outlet to make things with my hands and then send them into the world and have them appreciated. And it's a shame that that's so rare.
Yeah, and I didn't realize it was so rare until I started making outside of the SCA, and they were shocked at, like, you can make that, you made, like it's such a shocking thing. And
yeah. And then sort of come into theater world where that was really prized, the ability to take something from a 2D pattern and make it into a 3D object. Like it was a, it's not a skill you can just assume someone has. And so, and also a bit of a, like, this thing needs to be made and it needs to be done by a certain deadline, and, come come hell or high water, we're going to do it. And so that, that was the thing I already had experience with. Like, oh,
because we do a lot of late night sewing.
Talking about, yeah. So these are we're starting with pictures from from my triumphant return when I came back. So interestingly enough, we're gonna have a lot more pictures now, because there are not very many pictures of me before about 2012, when we all started getting smartphones. So like, I think that it will, in the future, when we're sort of archiving our own lives, I think the gaps will become obvious of, all of a sudden there's a time period of about 2 years before smartphones, and then after, when all of a sudden the sort of ubiquitous photography that we've now grown so used to was not always true. So here I am in eye patch, and when I first came back, I was just going to try a little bit of everything and kind of see where I fit in, like I talked about earlier. So I just pulled some tunics out from my collection. This one I particularly remember really liking, because I didn't have quite enough fabric, or like I cut it, and so I had to do some weird piecing on the shoulder to get it to work. And I did get it to work, and I was like, yes, I've made a tunic. I've used every single scrap. It's a bit unconventional, and it doesn't matter. I loved it. Oh, it's my cat. Hi, ISO. So this is done. This is Brigid looking very dignified, and I am photobombing her. And it was all fair because she'd photobombed me earlier in the day, but I couldn't find that picture. So, and this was the second sort of fitted 15th century thing that I kind of made for myself, and I got the sleeves, and I'm no longer that thin, so that that dress has been since passed on, but I was very proud of being able to make fitted things for myself. It's like, oh, and which is funny, because like I could do it on another person just fine. I do that in theater land all the time, and make the thing fit the person, but doing it on yourself is a completely different animal.
Yep.
Oh, here I am. Yeah. I did an experiment trying to make a placket over this kirtle to hide it, so that it would look a little bit more like the pictures from earlier time periods where you can't see a seam. And I eventually decided that I had not succeeded in that experiment, and so I opened it up and completely redid it. But sometimes you try a thing and it doesn't work. I think that's Eleonora right next to me. I recognize the hair. Also, I don't have that mug anymore. I dropped it at the parking lot at 12th night, and I'm still sad about it. All right. Oh, now we're gonna get into some baby pics, everybody. Do you want to see some pics of cute babies?
Always.
Fair warning, there's several in here of me breastfeeding. So if you don't like that, you can avert your eyes. Oh no, that's not good. Oh, come on. There we go. All right, technical difficulties. Darn you, computer. There we go. So here I am with my baby. I got pregnant and had a baby while being a fighter and still being really active. And it's an experience, everybody. Well, here I am. This is my friend Laura again. There I am, breastfeeding my baby.
Can you talk a little bit about how it is to come back from having a baby and, you know, trying to balance the things you have to do as a mother with being on the field? Because I found it very hard.
It's very hard. It was really hard. You know, the whole process is hard. You know, obviously I stopped fighting. I actually stopped fairly early on in my pregnancy. I found out I was pregnant. I went to, I think, 2 fight practices and I got through them. And then I realized that this didn't feel comfortable anymore. So stopped. And then, but I would still go to fight practice and I would like sit on the sidelines and rock back and forth like, you know, because I wanted to stay in the habit and stay connected to the community, and also just because I missed it. You know, it was hard to step away. Just when I was feeling like I was becoming sort of competent too, you know, because I was 2 years in to my fighting career by then, and like I was sort of only just then feeling like I was comfortable, and then had to stop. You know, I had my 9 months of pregnancy, and then I had my you know, 3 or 4 months basically waiting for my stomach muscles to come back and touch again. So that's sort of when I knew, like, okay, you know, things have tightened back up. I'll be all right. And then, but having a baby around while you're fighting is hard. I quickly discovered I cannot have the baby anywhere near if I'm trying to focus on a fight, because if I can hear him, it's all over. Like there's no way to stay focused on anything but that wailing infant. And so you know, I'd have to not bring in a fight practice, which was hard for the scheduling. Breastfeeding was hard. I took my lamella apart and I put it back together. I have that picture somewhere, but I don't think it's in these sets. So that I could breastfeed while he was there. Oh my gosh, look at that face. Yeah, it was hard to have a baby just in the SCA, much less trying to do it while also fighting. This is a picture of me at a 12th night. I took my baby to 12th night, do not recommend. But here we are having nap time because babies need nap time.
Their schedule.
Yeah. Yeah, he is at his second 12th night. I day tripped that 12th night too, because at that point I was just so lonely and I needed to be social, and 12th night was local that day. I'm like, all right, fine, I will day trip it. And I knew that I'm going to get nothing done that doesn't involve me watching a baby. So I made him this little coat. It's got a hook, like a loop at the back, and I have my belt hooked to him. So I have put my baby on a leash, and that's how I dealt with a baby at 12th night. Is I wandered around, I socialized with people, I watched the kid, and that was it. There was no court, there was very little merchanting, you know.
Yeah,
don't recommend.
And you talked about not being able to have the kids, your child in earshot while you're fighting.
I can't do it. It's still really hard.
My husband would be fighting in Crown and ask me to stay in our tent with the kids. you know, and I got a lot of criticism for being that inspiration that wasn't on the side of the field. But I was I was in the tent.
How dare they? Yeah. And like, well, can I go off on a tangent and a rant? Yeah, because like sometimes that's what's needed. You know, I think about this with a lot with my own fighting journey about like, you know, where is the role of inspiration, and how much like knight squire relationships, they're very different for every individual. But I think a lot of times the default is that who is cooking dinner and who is watching the kids. Like it can't be me. You know, and so it's you know, and then we get into the murky land of, you know, gender roles and gender assumptions and emotional labor and the hidden load, and it's all there. And yeah, and for me, what that looks like is a lot of I do a lot of planning beforehand, and you know, especially on weekends, we have to swap off childcare. And I'll say, today I am fighting, so Sam is yours. And then tomorrow we are not fighting. I am not fighting, so that I can watch Sam and you can do a thing. And so that's harder when it's a 3-day, you know, event, you know, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because there's one day for all the stuff. It's easier at an event like Eggles, which is a long weekend. And so I can and often will say, you know, I'm fighting Saturday and I'll take him Sunday, or vice versa, depending on which tournament I want to fight in. So it's really hard. Oh, look at this baby though. He's so cute. This is Baron Aaron Carino. Turns out loves babies.
It is great with them.
He's so good with babies. I always do love like finding things out about my friends that I didn't know before. And sometimes that thing is, this person's really good with babies. All right, let's look at some armor photos, because I feel like people are more interested in that. I'm sorry, viewing audience. This is so,
About the balancing fighting and parenting thing, though. I think that that's really important. And the gender roles too. I think that people don't understand how much of a challenge it is. And you have, I mean,
yeah, it's so hard. And yeah, and you know, there was a time period, you know, especially, you know, once my husband decided that he wasn't fond of fighting, and then we had to sort of fend off, you know, for the next couple of years. Well, why aren't you fighting? Well, like he had to sort of navigate that social world of like, I don't really like it, which is like, you know, a hard thing to say sometimes. And you know,
expected of men to fight.
it is expected, and you know, some parts of the culture are changing, but like they're, you know, yeah, we sort of expect, and somewhat reasonably, I think, you know, if 80% of fighters out there are male, yeah, it's not necessarily a rude question. But like I really feel that you know, turning some of those assumptions on their head really helps us to examine them, you know, who is doing some of that invisible labor. And you know, and I don't think there's any shame at all in being the inspiration that's back at camp with the kids. Like if that's what your family and what your fighter needs, yeah, let's make that happen. Here I am with my friend Kelly again. So this lameler, these pics are all out of order because they just are, but oh, my friend Kelly. Oh, this I did kind of want to go off on this tangent too. A lot of these pictures, I realized when I was putting them together, are pictures of myself and my high school friends who come to 1 or 2 events a year to hang out with me. And I feel like that is a aspect of the fringy world that doesn't really get a lot of attention, because when, you know, when we say like, you know, oh, fringy SCA, you know, we think of the people that come to 1 or 2 events to drink alcohol and party. That's not everything. and I think that you know, we would maybe get more participation from the people that only come to a couple things because their friends are there. If we were more welcoming on the outside. Notably, I feel like events should be fun. That's my hot take. Events should be fun. And they should be fun regardless of whether or not you drink. So
100%.
yeah, if there is feasting and song and fun contests and parties that can involve but don't have to involve alcohol, I think that's just a more welcoming experience for people, particularly people that might come back, decide it was cool, but it's not the hobby that they want to fully sink into. It's a thing they want to do a couple of times a year because their friends are doing it. And I think that we can do a better job of accommodating that.
I would love it if we would just get rid of the word fringy, because it
is terrible. It's a terrible
right?
word.
And it's a judgmental label.
It is.
And you should be able to play at whatever level that you want to, and that your life allows, and
your life allows. Yeah,
we should be happy to see you when you can make it.
Exactly. Yeah. Maybe you're off to college and can only afford one event a year, or maybe you've got health issues and your participation is really limited to online. Those are both still valid participants and oftentimes members of the SCA. And I think that, there shouldn't be judgment necessarily attached to that.
Absolutely.
Also, I was really proud of this tunic because Kelly was coming and I had a week to prepare, and she's like, oh, I want to come to Eggles with you. I'm like, oh, great. I'll be so excited. And she's like, I don't have anything to wear. And I'm like, I'll run you something up. And I ran her something up in 2 days and sight unseen with just her measurements, and it fit her perfectly. And I was very proud of myself.
I love that mug you're holding.
Oh my gosh, that's another mug that is now broken, and I'm real sad about it. Multiple times I was going through these pictures and being like, oh, I missed that cup. We have emotional attachments to things though, and I think that's another sort of aspect that we get attached to our gear.
Yeah,
it has emotional weight to it. This is my first night fighting, everybody. This is me and Ethelred Cloudbreaker. Is that not the funniest thing you ever saw? He's such a giant. And my first night out, he did a big swoopy swing, and he hit me right between the legs.
Oh,
I was fine, of course. I was like, all right, so I can get hit there, and it's not very fun. So I was one of those where I'd moved or something and didn't, he didn't intentionally hit me there, but he did. But I had so much fun fighting him, and that was very much here I am in this ridiculous pickle barrel with the helmet that's too big, and I'm in my a cotton button-up shirt because that's what I had, and blue jeans, and facing off against this man who's 7 feet tall. Just I kept going back. It's so fun. Here's me and some of my early kits. Oh, these are so out of order. But I guess it wouldn't be a slideshow without a bathroom mirror selfie. This is my most recent. I've taken apart my lamellar and I've put it into a coat of plates. And this is the resulting bathroom mirror selfie. So that's what I will be wearing when we meet again.
Awesome. And is that a full length dress like these?
I often wear a full length skirt. Yes. This right here is a piece of red brocade. That's just a skirt, but I also have full length dresses. This is me breastfeeding at a fight practice, everybody. That's my boob. It was really hard. Breastfeeding's hard. It was hard to do, and it was hard to stop.
Yep.
One of my absolute worst memories is trying to pump after being really sweaty fighting in a crown tournament. It's so stressful.
Yeah, it's so stressful. And I was never good with the pump, so I just fed him straight on my boob all the time. It got a lot easier once he could walk, and then he could kind of toddle up to me and I could just lean over, open up my kit, and there we were. But that was only a brief period towards the end. Oh, I love this picture. It's one of my favorites. My big swoopy skirt. I love fighting this skirt.
So tell me about that.
Well, I did a research project at one point where, you know, I wanted to find a bunch of pictures of you know, sort of ladies in armor, and it turns out in the 15th century, especially, there's this whole genre of mostly allegorical or historical figures of women in armor. And most of them are pure fantasy, just like they're the 15th century equivalent of boob armor. Like they're you know, they're you know, fantastical, you know, ancient Greek scales, or you know, breastplates with weird faces in them, sort of thing. But every so often there would be one where it was clearly like the artist had thought about, like, hey, if there was a lady wearing armor and she wanted to actually fight, what would she look like? And those ones tended to have things like neck protection and skirts that were ankle length rather than puddling on the ground, like and I did a whole research project on this, and I found lots of glorious images. One of the things I love about researching in the modern day is that it's a lot easier to look at things in the aggregate. I don't have to search through multiple books to find everything. I can throw everything up on a Pinterest board and look at it all at once and say, you know, gosh, 30% of these, you know, are this color, or, you know, so it's easier to sort of see trends and get familiar with the aesthetic of the world. And so I said, well, all right, here's where I am. I'm already super visible. Everybody notices the tiny petite woman in an eye patch on the field. So I might as well look good doing it. So I started making and wearing tournament skirts. And it turns out for our particular sport, an ankle length skirt is no impediment at all. At least it's not for me. The only time I get annoyed at it is when the fight is over, and if I'd gotten legged, coming up off of my knees is a pain, because then the skirts get tangled. But when I'm actually out there, at least for tournament fighting, if anything, they're just another layer of protection from getting hit on the shin, which is not a legal target, but does get swung at sometimes anyways. But if I get, you know, a sword tip coming towards my shin, the skirt tangles it up, and I have not had any shin bruises since I started doing this, like, at all. So
You're wearing a red belt. Tell me about your red belt.
my red belt, I am a squire to Sir Martin Harper. Let's see if I can scroll through and find a picture. Oh, that was another of my first night fighting. There I am. Oh, and there's Payne, and there's my husband. He tried it out too. There's a couple good pictures of Martin in here. Yeah, Martin and I had, you know, been going to the same fight practices for a while, and then I got pregnant, and oh, here we are. Yay, there's Martin. I love this picture though. It's the two of us, you know, knight and squire, red and blue. It's the whole thing. And yeah, so the knight squire relationship, I've heard it described as it's a little bit like awkward dating. Like nobody quite knows like who to ask first, and you know, there's no really set protocol, and you all have to sort of make the relationship what it needs to be for you. And so I sort of, you know, I knew that I wanted a fealty relationship, and I sort of had my eyes peeled and you know, had been looking out, you know, after that first year or so of fighting. You know, I had a night or two talk to me about it, but for whatever reason, it wasn't feeling like it was going to be a good fit. And then I got pregnant. I remember there was one fight practice where like we're all standing around and talking like you do, and Payne is there and Martin is there and somebody else was there, and they're talking about knight squire relationships, and you know, or somebody was saying, you know, what do you look for in a student and whatnot, and you know, and Martin said, you know, what do you look for in a squire? And Martin said, a dedicated student. And Ted awkwardly pipes up, well, she's here every week. And we both like had this like look of cringy horror. It's like, because like we hadn't broached the topic to each other yet, because we were still both kind of dancing around. And then I got pregnant, and then I had Sam, and then I came back. And not long after I came back, Martin and I finally had the discussion, and like, yeah, are you looking for a field? Yes, I am. And here we are, let's do a year and a day, sort of trial. And instead of being a man at arms, he did some research and he found the term femme de cour, as a period sort of term for someone in a fealty relationship. And so we did that a year and a day, and he set me some tasks, improve my soft kit and do some push-ups. Like, so I had to do, I don't have a whole lot of muscle, or at least I didn't then, I do now, but it's like 20 push-ups, and that's just seemed like the most crazy goal, but I did it, and here we are. And so we made it official, and then several years later, we happened to be again in a conversation, with somebody else about something else, and the topic came up, and he sort of mentioned that, like, he thought about asking me, and then I got pregnant, and when I got pregnant, he didn't want to ask me then because he wasn't sure that I was going to come back. And I sort of, that set me back a little bit. I'm like, that's totally fair. I'm super glad you didn't say that to me at the time, because my feelings would have been so hurt. But like, I can't blame him, because pregnancy is hard, babies are hard, children are hard, fighting is hard, and having it all together, it's a challenge. It's big.
And your priorities shift.
Your priorities absolutely shift. Yeah. And one thing for me, speaking of priorities, is that my priorities have absolutely shifted, in the years that I've been playing this game. And honestly, a priority shift has been part of what sort of keeps me interested and keeps me coming back too, is that I'm not 17 anymore. I have a different persona, a different set of things that I care about, and a different lease on life. And and the SCA sort of had to find a way to make that grow with me. And one of the ways that I made that grow with me was that I took up new hobbies, and one of them was fighting. Having hobbies within the bigger hobby it really helps me, keeps me in the game, as it were.
100%. I think that is the SCA's superpower.
Yeah, there should be something there. Oh, this is my that's so cute. This is my first armor. This is that set of lamellar, and I got it secondhand from current Baroness of Ariantum, Isla. And because she decided that she was no longer going to fight, and she had this beautiful set of lamellar, and then she passed it on to me, and it buckled in the back. And when I had the baby, I had to fix that. Oh, this is also a recent bathroom selfie. I decided that one thing I really didn't like about being on the sidelines at fighting was being there in my ugly sports bra while all the boys got to take their shirts off. And so I made a modified Langeberg bra so that I could have at least something that I felt kind of looked period.
I love that.
Yep, and you can shame all the dudes in spandex.
That's right. I look cool. Yeah, so this is my current kit. This is a full-length velvet dress. This is actually a hand-me-down from my mother. My mother made this dress years ago as like a 12th night dress in the late 90s. And I have a whole closet full of my mom's old garb, guys. And most of it's going to become fighting kits, because it seems appropriate to sort of take this thing with a little bit of history to it and send it off to Valhalla. And I expected this dress to last me 2 tourneys. I'm like, it's cotton velvet, but like the insides aren't even finished. Like it's just pinking sheared, and like I expected it to just shred after the first Ursulmus. It did not. It's years later, and I'm still wearing the silly thing. So
I love it. It looks fantastic on the field.
I love it too. I feel so swanky. But I've got several more kind of waiting in the wings for a special occasion, perhaps when I fight Crown again. Speaking of which, I know there's a picture in here of me fight a crown. Oh, I guess not.
Do you fight for your husband in Crown?
I do not. I have only fought in one crown. Oh, there it is. I fought for Mistress Morgan Donner. And it was an absolute joy and honor. And she wore red brocade to match mine, and she made herself a tabard with my arms, and she brought her dog all dressed up. And gosh, did we look cute.
Totally.
And it was so wonderful to carry her favor and you know, and stand in the procession and you know, and fight in that crown tournament. And of course I went 2 and out. It was my first crown tournament. It didn't matter. I had such a good time.
I love how enthusiastic she is about being your inspiration. And what a gift.
Yeah, it was really wonderful. And you know, and I had this whole plan to sort of cycle through inspirations, almost like you know, and I still do. I'm going to keep fighting for my friends, and because my husband is not at all interested in any any aspect of, you know, the standing in line for the procession, you know, the very far low probability of ever being king that way, but like he's not into it, any of it. And I said, that's fine. You know, we can enjoy the other aspects of our relationship without adding that in. I'm a big fan of inspirations that are friends.
Me too.
Just in general, I think it's a really great way to go. Oh, this was so there was a particular manuscript picture that I was trying to copy here, and I wanted, you know, I wanted again the sort of 15th century warrior archetype. And there's a lady with a spear in front of a tent with the red you know, kind of red patterned gold skirt, and this kind of tabardy thing over it. And I copied it, and I was real proud of myself. But the thing is just so hot to wear that I eventually dropped it and never wore it again. Oh, this is me at 12th night playing with the Camp Fromage party band, and it's not it's in the wrong set of pictures, but here we are, just enjoying ourselves.
While we're here, your knight is also a Laurel.
Yes.
Do you also have him mentor you in your arts?
Not particularly. In fact, we recently had a conversation about if I wanted that relationship, that, you know, he basically encouraged me to find somebody to sort of foster that that aspect of my craft. Funnily enough, the way he put it to me sure sounded like, please find someone to apprentice to so that our meetings can be shorter. I'm like, all right, that's fair, Martin. I will find somebody to apprentice to shorten your meetings. That is a service that I can provide for you. I just wanted to show this picture because I love it. I love the juxtaposition of, you know, me and the armor, and then the city behind me, but the tournament field right in front. And there's just, it's got everything. Morgan Donner took this picture. She takes such beautiful pictures. And I don't know, man, it's art, man, it's art. You know, because I think about a lot about, oh, here's another rant, hot take. The anachronism is the medieval thing in the modern world, not the other way around. Medieval thing, because we live in the modern world. That's the world we live in. We do a medieval thing, and that's the incongruous thing. That's the weird thing. And I love that we celebrate that. You know, there's something so wonderful about doing something that doesn't quite fit, because we love it. That's what that picture makes me think of.
Yeah, I love this picture. It's great.
Oh, this is another picture that doesn't belong in this series, but Charles de Bourbon, who's in the back there, at a June fair decided that he wanted to do a 15th century tailor shop. And, you know, he had some specific manuscript pictures that he wanted to showcase. And And so we did, we all set up with our 15th century stuff, and we got the furniture and the tent, and I am like 7 months pregnant here. And so I'm wearing, my old red kirtle, and I'm wearing the apron over because I just have the laces completely undone to accommodate the belly, like they probably did in period. So for all you ladies out there who do 14th and 15th century, you can absolutely be pregnant in it. They were pregnant in it. We can be pregnant in it too. It is form fitting and, and tight, but it doesn't have to be. And I don't know, I kind of felt like a princess, a pregnant princess wearing that. Here's me fighting, this is me fighting Ursul's. Oh, you can see here that with the split in my skirt, how ugly my leg armor is underneath it. That's the other advantage of wearing a skirt.
That helmet is fierce.
Oh, I love this helmet. It's yeah, so especially compared to the old one. Oh yeah, there. Here I am with Raven, who I believe you have on next week.
Yes.
Yes. We are there laughing about something, but yeah, I love the helmet. I knew from so Payne has a closed-faced bassinet that's somewhat similar, and I always hated fighting against it because the psychological aspect of not being able to see their face just I find really scary. And so when I put that on, and I was like, whoa, now I'm the scary one. Look at me, I'm the captain now. And also I thought at first that I was going to need, always an open face because I don't have a whole lot of visibility. It turns out that if the slots of the bassinet are where they're supposed to be on my eyes, I don't see so good anyway. And it's actually okay. And it doesn't impede my breathing that much. If anything, it's helpful because with my breath coming back at me, I then get the sense impact of hearing it, which sort of reminds me to slow it down if I'm hyperventilating or huffing and puffing to to keep it even and level. It's a little bit easier when I have an awareness being able to hear it. So anyway, I love that helmet too. Also, having a helmet that actually fits my head, I feel so much like, I don't have to take every little thing because it's easier to gauge like, if that shot was good or not. And reflective surface is reflective surface. And having mentioned that I love armor, armor is great. Armor protects me. There's me on a melee field. This is pre-pregnancy, I can tell because of the location of the Lamler. I'm standing next to Sefta Prembuk there. I do fight in melees. Let me find another picture of that. Oh yeah, so here I am, the saddest Chandler. So Philip de Montel and his brother, they sort of have a household called the Chandlers, and they're based off of a 14th century Flemish idea, which was that the various guilds of the city would form militias and then send them out to defend the city. And they really took this super period idea and ran with it. They formed this whole household, and I super admired them and thought it was really cool. And and at one point I needed somebody to fight with in a war or a melee, and I was like, can I join you guys? You guys are cool. And they were like, sure, and so yeah, there I am in my stripy tabard. But because of the angle of the bassinet, I just look sad.
I love watching all the Chandlers together on Tier West War.
Oh my god, it's so fun. Yeah, and I mean that's the thing about melee is that it really is all about who you're with, and and how connected you are to the team, and if everybody around you is having fun, it's hard not to also have fun. Oh, not bad. I was trying to make a mom joke here. Oh, that's Martin behind me, watching me fight. This is also early days of me fighting, but I think this really illustrates just how small I am compared to the normal ontier fighter, the average ontier medium fighter.
Yeah, those guys aren't big guys.
No.
But I'm not very big.
No.
Oh yeah, here's another of me fighting with the Chandlers. And even there, like, you know, I moved the tabard down to make kind of a skirt because I just really like how it looks and feels to be wearing a skirt on the field. And I feel like, you know, one of those cool allegorical ladies in the manuscript. And like, you know, my skirt is flowy. I'm kicking some ass. So yeah, those are the armor picks, I think. Yeah, I've got a couple more folders. I guess we could look at some garb that I've done or my leather work.
Let's look at your leather work.
Yeah, let's do that.
Showed a picture of the Fromage Band, and that's kind of the group that does the 14th, 15th century.
Yeah, they're not the only ones, but yeah, that was sort of the like I said, I came when I first moved to Seattle to Madrona. Like I knew from, you know, sort of my previous SCA career, was that Madrona was sort of known for being really cliquish, and you know, and everybody sort of forms in their own little groups. And I wanted to combat that. And so when I first showed up in 2013, I deliberately sort of camped with anybody who'd let me and hung out with anybody who, you know, who seemed cool. And I met a lot of really amazing people, and you know, and I knew, and this is exactly what happened. I knew that eventually I'd sort of, you know, settle into seeing some of the same people more often. And part of that is interest, and part of that is frankly geography. It's a lot easier to hang out with people who are also in North Seattle where I am than it is to hike through downtown or across the lake. And that's just the nature of humans being social, I suppose. But yeah, I did eventually sort of settle into a time period and interest and a place, and found the people that were also into those things. So let's do this. And yeah, I found the leather work. Like I said, it's still pretty new. And I'm really proud of it. And we're gonna look at a whole bunch of it now. This is a belt that I'm actually wearing it now. And part of this was an experiment with egg tempera. I thought it would be, I was looking at all of these things that were painted, and I was like, well, how would they have painted them? And, you know, a lot of times the museum description is not very helpful. It just says polyphony, or, you know, paint, but sometimes it would actually say, you know, tempera or whatever. I'm like, all right, paint from an egg. Cool, that sounds great. So I look up how to make paint from an egg, and I it involves grinding pigments. I don't want to do that. So what I ended up doing, because I went to the art supply store and I found pigments to grind, or that were already ground, and I'm like, this is great, but they're $20 for a little tiny jar, and I cannot afford that. So I bought a set of chalk pastels and I smooshed them, and then I used that to make egg tempera. And so this is me painting my belt. So yeah, and like I said, I started making these and I just started cranking them out. Some of these have cute little emojis on the hanging loops. I love that.
So tell me what the purpose of them were. I can't even say that right. What was the purpose in period?
So the purpose is to hold small precious things. So there are often cases for books. You know, small. You know, if you wanted to travel with your herbal or whatever, you might put it in a leather case. I've seen them for communion wafers. For wax tablets, if you've got your collection of wax, you know. And originally, the original case, Morgan and I made them for our cell phones. We were like, we want something to put our cell phone in that's going to look period. And, you know, here's some cases that are made for wax tablets, which is sort of the medieval equivalent, I suppose, the thing you take notes with. And yeah, books, wax tablets. They're often used for pens, pens and ink bottles, for like a traveling scribe. You want to have your pen and ink with you, so you put it on your belt. Yeah, because I think about this a lot, that the sort of the medieval thought on labor versus resources is kind of opposite to ours. We have all the material resources we could want. Like I can order leather and have it be here next week. I don't have to tan it myself or any of that. But what we're short on is labor, and like the time to make a thing. And they maybe have the opposite. They have all of the labor and maybe not the resources. So they have maybe a different idea of reusing things, and what do we take time to do? What do we take time to protect? I'm going to protect my book because that's hundreds of hours of labor. I'm never going to but also material resource, like that's somebody had to make that vellum, and vellum is a pain in the ass to make, so it would be expensive, sort of. So yeah, you have a small precious thing you want to carry around with you, you're going to want to protect it, and one way to protect it is by making a leather case that goes over it. Things like, next on my docket is I'm going to make a spoons case, a couple of spoons. So if you've got nice silver or bronze spoon that needs to travel with you, maybe you make a case for it. This is my baronial arts and sciences display, where I kind of show the whole thing. Oh yeah, here I am bleeding on my project.
That makes it legit.
Yeah, was legit blood on it. Oh, this one was cool. This is a case I've made a couple of these now, with the iconography from the animals from the Fiore, the flower of battle. It's a fencing treatise from the 14th century, 15th, 14th, somewhere in there. And the idea is that the various animals symbolize different attributes that you want in a fighter. So you have the tiger for speed with the arrow, and you've got the lynx for precision or prudence with a set of like calipers. And you've got your lion with courage. That hasn't changed. And then the elephant is steadfastness. Look at it. Fortitude. And they have Latin equivalents, and then there's this whole branch out of you need all four of these, but some fighters are going to have more of one than the other. But the ideal is to be balanced. But also cute animals look good on a leather case. So
It's just beautiful work.
this is one of my more recent cases. This was a commission for Guillaume, Master Guillaume, who is the leader of the band, and he wanted a case for a recorder. And like, I couldn't find any recorder cases from, things that were recorder cases from period, but again, it's a small precious thing. It made sense to me that one might make a recorder case for it. And I did find several 15th century scroll cases, like for traveling messengers and whatnot. So that's sort of what I based this off of. And then I took a Madonna, and I redid some of the iconography on her to make her Saint Cecilia and the patron saint of musicians. And I made this case. I was really happy with it. That's my workspace, or was. My whole family photo. Oh yeah, here's the Saint Cecilia case again. Boy, okay, so black leather is really hard to take a photograph of. This was sort of the the Saint Cecilia case. I made this recorder case, and it eventually went to Madalena.
And are you selling these?
Yes, I was gonna wait to plug it at the end, but I do have an Etsy. It is under Rotrude Crafts, and you can purchase leather cases from me, and people do. I actually wanted to talk about this one because this one was recently purchased by a fellow, I believe it was this one. If not, it was one that was very similar. I got a purchase from somebody in Switzerland, and they contact me and they say, hey, I would like my coat of arms on it. And I'm like, certainly, that is a service that I offer, sir. And he said, like, please send me a picture of your coat of arms. And he's like, okay, here's my family coat of arms. And he sends me a picture, and I look at it and I'm like, that looks suspiciously like a 15th century manuscript there. And I Google reverse image searched it, and it was a Hans Holbein the Elder painting. And I said, oh, that's a legit name. And then I look up the arms, and yeah, it's still the name matched, the heraldry matched. I'm like, this is like a legit Swiss lord.
Cool.
And so I just about died of, oh my gosh, wow, must be crazy to be European and just like have legitimate history, heraldry just dripping from your ears.
Nice.
Anyway, so I was really excited to sell a thing to Europe. This one I made for my friend Nicklin, who was recently laureled, and this was a gift for her vigil. And this one I based off of, so these the extents of these cases are mostly 15th century, but there's a few in the 14th and a few in the 16th, and this was one from the 14th. And it had this great sort of crazy imagery of the man and the tree and the two lovers below it, and there was a saint on the other side, and it was just really fun to sort of take something, and kind of do my best not to exactly copy it, but try to fit in the spirit of the thing. And part of that was that, like, gosh, this diapering looked like it was done completely free-handed, and rather than like sat out and meticulously. I'm like, okay, so I just got to kind of trust my hand, and it was moderately successful, but so was the original. And that was another part of like looking at extant pieces in the aggregate. You really start to notice the hand of the maker, as is called, the flaws and all the little idiosyncrasies of, like, and some of it is helpful for figuring out the order of operations. Like, I think they did this step first, because if they had done it second, then it wouldn't have had this flaw. Kind of thing. And it becomes this really sort of organic process of trying to step in the shoes of somebody from literally 500 years ago and figure out how they thought about this thing that they were making. And is it the same way that I'm thinking about the thing that I'm making? And like, how crazy it is to think that, humans don't really change. No.
And it's the aesthetic of the time versus our kind of machine made.
Exactly. Yeah. And like, you think again, the opposite, where like, their perhaps ideal was to have a thing look perfect, and then they would fail at that ideal. Whereas we can have a perfect machine made thing anytime. And so now, now what we want is to see that someone made it by hand, and then that has its own cachet. And like it, the past really is a different country. And I imagine if we were to talk to somebody from a different time period, they would be baffled by some of the attitudes that we have, because we live in our modern world and they live in their contemporary world. And that's really amazing to think about. Oh yes, this project. Okay, so I mentioned about experimenting with egg tempera. So I made this case. It's another Fiore animal case. And I was very excited. And like, oh, look at the colors. I've got it down to a color palette. I got the black and the white and the red, and it looks great, and the yellow. I was so happy. And then this happened. So what it was that at the time I was still using a modern alcohol-based dye. And I dyed this case dark brown to match the extants, which were done, with probably with the iron oxide dye. And the modern alcohol dye just seeped through the colors of the tempera. And so I had to learn the hard way that I can't do that. If I'm going to paint on a thing, it needs to be either undyed or it needs to be a dye that's going to be color fast enough not to seep through. I still have that case and I've put so many hours of work into it. I can never sell it. Here it is. So I think it'll be a tourney prize at some point. So.
Are you like finger weaving, finger plating the cording on these?
You know, I am not. I tried finger loop braiding once and I didn't like it. So what I actually do is I just do a simple twist, like just, you know, twist one way and then the other opposite way around itself. So I just made a simple cord. My husband actually will do finger loop braiding. And so when I need a new lacing for a kirtle, I have him make it because he'll actually do the proper finger loop braiding. But me, I'm like, no, I hate this. I would rather sit and twist a cord because my hands are already used to that motion because I braid my hair like that sometimes. It's just easier for me.
Right. So the answer is yes, you are making your own cord.
Yes, but it's not finger loop braiding because that's its own thing.
It's not paracord.
No, it's not paracord. There's my first one. There's a more recent. This is a little teeny tiny needle case, and I was so proud of how it turned out. Another thing is a lot of the medieval extant, pretty much anything, it's tiny. It's little and wee, and you look at this thing and you think, oh, okay, that makes sense, and then you realize that the thing is half the size that you thought it was, and you're like, how do their eyes not like just like, you know? And I suppose the answer is that maybe the person who worked on this is nearsighted, and this is how they contribute to the world. So, yeah, I've started having to wear readers when I do this leather work because I am no longer in my 20s.
I can't relate to that at all.
No, not at all. But it was definitely like, oh no, here we are in a new stage of life. Got some reading glasses.
I'm pushing 53 and the readers don't cut it anymore. I'm looking at mine.
No, they come for us all. So that's the leather work.
Very cool.
I think there were a couple of more garb things I wanted to talk about, but I'll just put these up and we can kind of talk over them.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the last folder, I promise everybody.
And we'll make sure to put your Etsy link in the
yes, put the Etsy link, and I would also love it to put in the Athenaeum link as well, because so yeah, let's talk about Athenaeum. Actually, I think the next picture is here I am at an Athenaeum. So again, Charles de Bourbon came from Osceola and had this idea that we should be doing a similar event to a thing that they do there, and he made it a thing, and now we have Athenaeum. Sorry for that terrible paraphrase, Charles. But basically, there was clearly a need for a non-competitive arts event where people could show their stuff, and so we've made it happen. And so for the first 2 years, we actually, there we go. So this is me at the first Athenaeum, and here I just had sort of just random bits and bobs. I have a shirt that I made for my knight that's sitting there. I've got some baby garb. I've got my armor kit, and and the research that I'd done to back it up, and a little bit of a little bit of calligraphy, a little bit of cooking, a little bit of everything. And then the next Athenaeum, here I am, and it's all leather work all the time. And it was actually really cool to have, like, not only to have something new to present, but like something that I had a focus on. And that was the great thing about Athenaeum, was that it was, for those that don't know, it's basically you have a table where you can display, they call it a body of work. And it's intentionally open-ended because it means that you can show one project or you can show all of your projects, whichever it suits, what you want show and tell about. And so, my first body of work was very general and a little bit of everything. And then my second time was like, no, this is the thing I'm focusing on. And it is this wonderful leatherwork thing. And so it was really great and led to completely different experiences from both ends, I think. Yeah, so here I am presenting and feeling really good about showing people a thing I'm really enthusiastic about in a very sort of low-key, non-competitive setting, which is not to say that I don't like competition, because I do. I'm one of these people that actually does sort of thrive on, the thrill of entering a contest and win, with the potential of winning, and I like getting cool prizes, and I like the word fame that sort of comes with it. But which is not necessarily to say that I have to win every time. Like, when I enter a thing, particularly if it's an arts thing or a thing that I feel like I'm particularly good at, my goal is to, if I don't win, it's because they beat me. Like, make them strive for their best as well. I remember when Eagles has lots of contests. Eagles has this whole Rotrude or 3 pillars thing where you can, there's arts things, there's the martial things, there's service things. It's a whole setup. That's one of the reasons I like going to Eagles, is that you can enter a bunch of contests and you might win some of them, and the prizes are really cool. And it's really cool to come home with a thing that you won. Like my husband, that first Eagles, he won an axe throwing, and he got to come home with an axe. And like, it was just such a thrill to have this tangible object that he then has a story attached to. It's the same reason people buy souvenirs. So, I like that. And but one time I entered the bardic section of Eagles, and I had this poem that I'd written, and it was sort of loosely based off of some of the epic poetry that I'd read, growing up, and it was about various fighters that I'd known and was inspired by, and I was really, I'd set it all up and was really proud of it. And then somebody else comes along, and I really wish I remembered her name. I feel so bad. Anyway, but she also wrote a poem that was similar in theme to mine, about the joys of fighting and the inspiration, to be found in battle. But she had like gone a deep dive into like some of the Old Norse form poetry, and like her poem just blew mine out of the water. And like it had kennings and shit. Like, it was like, I was astounded. I was like, I can't possibly be mad. Her poem was better than mine. And I was really proud of mine. And and I feel like we both made that contest better, because you can't have a contest without contestants. And the better the contestants, the better the contest. And that's was really thrilling. And like, I'm often very happy to be defeated in any kind of battle, really. So long as I feel like everybody's, giving it their best. That's really important to me. A competition, lots of people have opinions about arts and arts competitions and whether or not we should even be doing that. And I'm of the opinion that we absolutely can do that. But I'm also of the opinion that there is clearly a need, and people want non-competitive forms to show off their art. And I think that is also awesome. And I'm here for it. So here I am, literally here for it.
And I have links to Athenaeum, to your Etsy, and then also to the Rotrude's Facebook page.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Oh, the reason that I mentioned, I went on this long tangent about Athenaeum, but I actually want to talk about, so the past 2 years, because we have not been able to meet in person, they put Athenaeum online. And it was a completely different thing. It was a different format. It was basically, they set us up with a way to make a long form blog post about whatever it is that we were working on. And I loved that too. I loved having the deadline, and I loved having the structure, because I'd sort of waffled on like, I should really make a blog and put some of my work online. And I just didn't want to. And then having suddenly a format that was basically sort of provided for me to build on, it was just like, all right, cool. I'll put my project on the Athenaeum site. And then I was really proud of it. Both years, I was really proud of, being able to put web work out in a different format that's perhaps more accessible in a lot of ways to people. And I'm thoroughly of the opinion that maybe we should think about doing every other year in person versus online when it comes to Athenaeum in particular, because I think that format has a lot of pros as far as accessibility and just spreading the word and and sort of making the things that we do easier for people to find.
And it helps us fulfill as a corporation our
Absolutely.
to educate, which I think that we sight of a lot. And
You do. It's true.
talked about invisible labor, and the number of artists that do blogs and do use the internet to educate is huge, and in a lot of ways that carries the SCA.
Yeah. Oh, it's super important. And we talk about we're fame and reputation, and that in this modern world that we live in, that is a major way to have a reputation. Is what do you appear to be when you're online? And I mean, we could get off on a real big tangent here about who we are when we're on social media. Is that the same person we are when we're at an event? Because yes. Because the way that we present ourselves and the way that we interact with people, the internet is not the same as it was 15 years ago when you could be largely anonymous. We're no longer anonymous. We have our names and our faces literally attached to everything we do and say now, for better or for worse. And I think that, we're still dealing with the, we feel like we're sheltered and anonymous because we're against a computer screen, and that's no longer true. That's who we are. That's who you are. The things that you say are who you are. And honestly, like that was one of the things when I was looking for a night, when I was looking to squire to somebody, I did a lot of kind of stalking nights and seeing what they saw, what do they say on social media? What do they post on the Armor Archive back when that was, more happening than it is now? What are they saying on Facebook? And, do they take their time to measure their words? Or do they spout off at the, the merest, scrap of emotion? And, I knew what I was looking for in a night. And one of those things was somebody who could avoid showing his butt on the internet. So, yeah, I think that's an important way to showcase our own chivalry and our own courtesy is by presenting ourselves in a good light in public. And the computer is a public space now, more so than it ever was. Here we are over Zoom.
And one of the beautiful things about your night is that he will make a mistake publicly, and he will say, "Oh, hey,
Yep.
I learned something."
Yeah, and that's important. Yeah, and that absolutely was a check in the pros column with the Martin as a knight.
Not to like harp on Martin, which he's Martin the Harp.
Now he'll appreciate that joke. It's fine.
But he also is a champion for people who may not be able to champion themselves. And I have been so impressed with how much he's grown and worked to champion others the last couple of years.
And it's important because it's important for us as humans to grow, and because our world is changing around us, around our ears as we speak, and being adaptable and being able to learn from our mistakes and being able to, as as the quote goes, when you know better, do better. And, these are important things. And I'm actually, there's a part of me that, is looking forward to, the end of plague times, as we all are. But one of the things I'm looking forward to is I'm really interested to see what has changed and what we can do to make things better, in this sort of forced stepping back of, and reassessing, what is this game to us, and what do we want it to be? And, to a certain extent, it's an opportunity to say, what do we want? We can make this game better. We can make ourselves better. So.
And I have to admit, I have a lot of fears around coming back and not having any of those changes having taken place.
Yeah.
That would
absolutely.
be really disappointing. So.
Well, and I've been thinking about a lot about what's kept me in the game, and and what continues to keep me in the game, and and one of those things is that I've been at this for so long, and I I'm in this very strange sort of space in that I'm can sort of be this up and coming young exciting not yet a peer artist and fighter and all of this bright shininess, but I'm also a dinosaur. Like and if I don't know the story behind whose name is written in blood on that particular role, I know who to ask to find out, like that sort of thing. And after some self-reflection a while ago, I determined that one of the things that keeps me in the game is that is setting boundaries around my participation, and as shallow as it sounds, I only do what I want. Like I don't, and so I have I have deep and heartfelt opinions about which events I like to go to and which events I absolutely despise. And and then I'm in the position of like, I have all those opinions and I have absolutely no interest in running said events. Like that's not my branch of service. But I sure do really feel that if you're not willing to provide potable water on site, you shouldn't be having an event there. But things like that. Because I think that ambiance is important, and I think that a pleasant experience is important. Events should be fun. And if you go to an event and it's in the middle of a cow field on the eastern side of the mountains in August, you are not going to have a good time. Nobody is having a good time at that event. I'm sorry. Maybe we shouldn't be doing that. So, and I'm also very careful about, when I invite people to come with me to SCE events, I'm very careful about who I invite, because like I have to know that they're going to enjoy this experience, and part of that comes from them and part of that comes from us. And so if I think this is a person who's going to enjoy the experience of an arts and sciences medieval science fair, maybe I'll take them to an ANS event. But if I think that this is a person who is going to enjoy the fighting and the camping and the the late nights under the stars, then I'll take them to to an Ondir West War or an Eagles or something like that. Because I want people to have a good time. And one of the ways that we can have a good time, one of the ways that I have a good time, is to find those moments of being transported, to a different time and place, whatever that looks like for us. I like going out, and strolling by some pavilions and looking up at the stars and feeling like, for just a moment that I'm feeling the same things that somebody in 1340 felt. That's important to me. And that's really hard to find when you're in a modern day hotel. So opinions. I have opinions on what events I like to go to.
But we do have a question from the audience.
You should stop sharing your screen though.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Do I, or should I?
Or go to another picture.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah, it's all right. Pictures.
So your mom would like you to talk about second generation pros and cons.
Oh, pros and cons. Oh, that's a great question. So the pros are that you know, I know what the game is about, and I know what I want from it. That's the big pro. You know, this sort of world is air and water to me. It's familiar. It feels like home. You know, when I every time I've left and then come back, and I come back to that, you know, to that Eagles or you know, to that fight practice, and you know, there's a part of me that's like, oh yeah, I can relax. You know, this is where I grew up. This is what this is a place that I know. I love, another reason I still go to Eagles is that I get to go onto the field and fight my childhood heroes. Like, that's so great. Like, I get to stand across the field from Chorkyo Kana, who's just wandering around like he's not some legend, and you know, and then he kills me, and it's great. um, you know, I get to fight Vesta, I get to fight Ambrose, I get, you know, there's a whole, you know, Morgan the Truehearted still out there. I'm like, oh, you know, I remember playing chess with you when I was 12 and you let me win, and that was very courteous of you, but I'm terrible at chess. Like, you know? So that's a pro. The con, which is sort of the flip side of that, is that I feel, and maybe you know, somebody will pipe in here to tell me I'm wrong and I don't understand myself, but like, I don't think I'm a very good chatelaine. I'm not good with random new people because I've never been a new person. Like, you know, and so I can info dump on you, but that's maybe not the interaction that you need. And you know, and it often might not occur to me that you won't know what a duke is. Because like
Breathing air to you.
yeah, this is the world. Like, and you know, and I could even talk about, you know, the differences between, you know, some, you know, SCA titles and what they mean versus the period titles and what they mean, and like, you know, yeah, this is different from real life, but like, this is a game we play, we've been doing it for 50 years. You know, again, with the you know, I may or may not know, you know, whose name is written in blood on that rule. So I don't know that some of that or any of that is what you want a first time person at an event to hear.
But you're a good chatelaine. Like, you were talking earlier about how you judge like people that you want to introduce to the SCA by what you think they might like, and the SCA feels like so much of a home to you that you feel comfortable bringing people to the SCA.
Yeah.
And I have to say that is a really great way to be a chatelaine. Like, there's a very long part of my life in the SCA where the SCA was completely separate from my other life because they didn't intersect at all. Because I wasn't comfortable having them intersect because it wasn't home, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and when I'm out in the world and like, you know, like I go to the doctor and I have to introduce, like, here's why I have weird bruises. You know, I often search for, you know, because my doctor doesn't want the whole spiel. They don't want to hear all about this 50-year history. What my doctor wants to hear and needs to hear and was very happy to hear was, I do a high impact martial art. And this is the equipment that I use. And these are the injuries that I expect. And, you know, so that's sort of, and I guess the reason I don't see myself as a chatelaine is that, like, to me, the chatelaine is the person, you know, greeting the first timer. Whereas, you know, maybe I'm the sort of chatelaine that's more on the back end of, you know, of doing some of the emotional labor of, this is what you're into and this is how it can fit into this game. And that's, you know, maybe that needs a different word. I don't know.
Both things are important, right? One of the things that I've heard a lot of second gen people talk about is feeling slightly overshadowed by their parents. Did you ever feel that? Or do you think that taking your break kind of helped with that?
Yeah, I had a real well, not quick or easy solver, but yeah, but I went away and then I came back in a different barony. Like 10 years later, and 100 miles away. And so yeah, there were and are some people who remember me from my childhood, but it had been a long time and it, you know, is a different context. And I felt like I was really able to sort of make my own name, because I was in a different geographic space than my mom was. And the 10 years helped. And frankly, the taking up fighting helped too, being in a completely different, facet of the SCA from my mother was valuable for that as well. Because now, my first, my first bit of word fame when I get introduced is, oh, there's Rotrude, she's a fighter, rather than, oh, there's Rotrude, she's so-and-so. No, she's Lutgard's daughter. Because I made some of my own fame. And
Certainly have.
yeah, and yeah, so I never felt particularly overshadowed. And I don't know that I was particularly overshadowed when I was a teenager either. Like I said, I was doing a lot of things on my own at that point. And I got my AOA at 14 for doing things like serving at feasts and whatnot. But like after that, it was very much I was doing, I was hanging with my friends and doing, teenager things. And yeah, I don't know. I always felt like people sort of accepted me for me. And so that experience is maybe a little bit different from the common. Yeah, because I've definitely talked to other second gens, and they absolutely have that story of like, my double peer parents really really made it hard to find my own way. And like it's legit, man.
We're gonna have to send our kids to Europe or something.
Right. Yeah, maybe that's what. Hey Sam, you should go to college in Germany. It'd be great.
So we're at a little over 2 hours.
Oh, sure.
Is there something that you wanted to talk about that we haven't talked about?
I mean, I have a little notepad list of things I wanted to talk about, but
bring it out.
All right. So I have written down here, events should be fun. The fun should not be entirely dependent on alcohol. I guess the major thing is that court is boring and we have too much of it. So speaking of, so this is Edonia's, here's a picture that I'm going to use to segue. So this is my friend Edonia on vigil for her laurel, and it is a 12th night. And like I said, I dislike 12th night, and this one was far away from me, but it was the one where she was getting her laurel. And I said, all right, you are my friend from way long ago, and I will go to this event that I hate for you. And, because again, like, the one reason to go to events is because your friends are there, and you want to hang out with your friends. And court is very boring unless your friends are getting awards. And so when I came back, so I used to be a big court junkie. Like when I was a teenager, I went to every court and I was so excited, and I loved sitting there, and I loved watching the whole thing. And it didn't matter to me, if they were long, unless it got interfered with my meal times, which is never good. But I used to love court, and when I came back, I found I disliked it. And I couldn't figure out why for a while. And I only figured out recently. It was because when I was a teenager, I knew everybody. And so I knew, if I didn't know the person up there getting an award, I at least knew all the royals. And, so like, if every other piece of court business is something I'm familiar with and somebody that I care about, then yeah, court's fun. Well, when I came back, I didn't know as many people. I'm in a new barony, new place. And frankly, the SCA cycle of generations has now gone to, 2 5-year spans past. And court was boring. And I took my husband, oh, I love him so much. I took him to a 12th night, one that was local. And I'm like, all right, here's 12th night. It's it's not my favorite event, but you know, it's the one where people get to dress up really fancy, and I do like dressing up really fancy. That's why I like to dress up fancy, and I like to see my friends. So that's what we're going to do. But my husband was like, no, I want the full experience. And so he sat through a full 7 hours of court. And I was flabbergasted. I was like, you don't have to do this. And he's like, yes, I do. I'm like, you don't have to do this. We get to the end of that 7 hours, and he looks at me, and I'm like, he says, boy, that was boring. And I'm like, you never have to do this again. I swear. Like, I promise you. And it, like, you know, because it's torture. You know, and yeah, we can make court more fun with having more theatrical stuff or whatnot, but I don't think that that's the magic bullet. I don't think it's the key. And here's the thing is that I've worked in theater and you do not go to a fourth grade school play because you're expecting a Broadway show. You go to a fourth grade school play because your kid's in the play and you're proud of them and you're really excited to see them do their thing with their friends. And that's the same reason we go to court. We don't go to court looking for a Broadway play. We're looking for the fourth grade musical because our friends are there. And frankly, the overlap between can win a tournament versus can hold a stage, that's a very small sliver of a Venn diagram. I'm sorry. And I just, and I, you know, if we want to talk about if I had my way, the king and queen would give out awards of arms and peerages, and that's it. And everything else would be delegated. Because to me, and actually, we light on this picture in the beginning, here I am getting an award from my local baron and baroness. And I'll tell you what, some of those awards mean way more to me than my kingdom awards because they're from people that I know and people that I care about and people in my community who saw me do a thing and said that it was good. And that, man, that means everything. Oh, I'm about to cry. It does. And that's what I want from court. I love it when people get up and like, this is gonna sound terrible, but I love it when they cry. Like, because I love the moment of like, of gratitude and thanks and the emotional accept and understanding of that, like I did a good thing and people liked it. And because we need that in our lives. We are humans. We like a bit of ceremony and we like that, you know, that corner of the hierarchy pyramid of, you know, that's one of the things we need is acceptance from our community, and that's important. And
being seen, recognized, especially by someone that you know really sees you.
Yeah. It means everything, you know, and then to sit through 7 hours and, you know, get called up and, you know, talk to a stranger, it's not the same. So I don't know. I'm you know, I really feel like a lot more things can and should be done at the local level, and that they will not lose any cachet by being given to you by your local prince and princess or baron and baroness. And in fact, it may even mean more. But you know, again, opinions, have them.
Completely on board with that opinion. I am in agreement for sure.
Yeah, let's see if there's any of these.
So are you Madrona Arts and Science champion?
I am currently Madrona's Arts and Science champion perpetually because COVID. Yes, and before that I was the Bardic champion. And you know, just I don't know, maybe I'll collect them all. Probably not rapier champion though, because of the screaming and crying when you menace me with a pointy stick. But yeah, I like engaging at that sort of local level, and I like it as a bit of a not exactly like a practice or rehearsal for a bigger stage, but it's definitely a you know, wade in the water and sort of get my, you know, get the art or whatever thing that I'm presenting, you know, in a presentable form. not exactly a rough draft, but like, is this something that, that I'm comfortable presenting? And is this a thing, and then learning from that experience of like, okay, this is the thing that audience is engaged with. And this is a thing that, nobody really wanted to look at. And what does that mean for how I present my art? And, so there's a value, I think, in, in being able to show something locally to people that before you show it off to strangers. And I feel like that's really, really important.
I love this hat collar.
This is my tomatillo outfit. It was a tomato outfit when I wore it with a red curl, but then I outgrew the red curl and now it's a tomatillo. Yes, I made this cute little dagged hood because I needed something to keep me warm. And then a lot of the 14th and 15th century hoods are open in the 14th century, they're open in the front and they have buttons. And then the 15th century, they lose the buttons and they become just like this, which then it eventually evolves into a hennin and then the French hood. And anyway, this whole rant about costuming. But the important thing is that Alianora, who actually pointed out to me that the reason that she thinks that that women in particular have the open front hoods is so that you can get them on over your hair. You don't have to pop a hood completely off and on. You can just come at it from the back, because you got braids and stuff going on. Anyway. So,
makes sense.
Yeah. Do I want to talk about this? No, we're running late, so I suppose we'll wrap it up. See if there's anything else. Oh, this is me with being Edonia's lady in waiting again. Oh, here's another. We were talking about balancing the various things I do. This is a local Madrona Champions, and I had been fighting earlier. That's why my hair is all messy, and I'm still wearing my fighting coif and the eye patch. And then I went to go over and play with the band. And so negotiating that sort of space in between fighter Rotrude versus the Rotrude who does everything else often necessitates a wardrobe change, and sometimes that is harder than others. Also, Susanna talked a little bit about this in, when I put on a dress, it's hard for people to remember that I fight. And, the red belt helps a little bit with that, but not always. And that is a frustrating place to be, to be standing around and trying to get in on some of the, oh, they're doing, I can see they're talking about that shot I've been working on, and I really want to jump in the conversation, but like, they don't even see me there. And that's really hard. So, yeah, and I think we can, here we are at Peasants Revel, and we all looked like a particular medieval manuscript, and it was just so much fun to feel like we were, in a picture of peasants dancing. So yeah, yeah. So that was me talking for 2 hours. I hope you all found it somewhat entertaining.
Definitely, you're so passionate about everything you're doing. That's very cool.
That's what I got, man. When I first started fighting, people will compliment me for having so much heart and so much aggression and show so much, passion for what I did. And I had to look back and say that it's literally all I've got. I'm not big, I'm not strong, I'm not fast, I'm not skilled, but I really care about the thing. So that's where I started, and it's a good place to start.
I think that's the most important component of being successful is your passion for it. So
For sure.
Yay.
Well, thank you for meticulously putting together all of those pictures.
Oh, I had a whole like arc and scope of what we were going to talk. It's fine. It's fine. We muddled through.
You did great. And I apologize again for my album
Yeah.
fit. Anyway.
Computers, man, they suck.
And, I'm old.
Yeah.
I just can't sometimes.
Yeah. happening to us all as we speak.
Thank you for sharing your story. It was really awesome to get to know you a little bit. I've just kind of seen you in passing and camped nearby you. So this was really good for me.
No, I'm so glad. I also have appreciated these interviews for little glimpses, you know, into the hearts and minds of people that maybe I wish I knew a little better. So like, I think it's valuable for us all. I'm excited for this community building to bear fruit. I hope.
Yeah, I hope so too. So usually at the end we talk about what we have coming up. On Sunday, we have sort of a special thing happening. Duchess Lau was at one point a laurel for her performance arts in the SCA. And she doesn't really play in the SCA anymore, but we did interview her. And one of the things that came out of that interview was that somebody had some tape from her doing one of her performances in the 80s. And that person, whose name I'm spacing out, managed to get it to Sir Attias, who used his magical movie editing skills to put it into a 2-part series. And so on Sunday, she's going to premiere that on her YouTube channel, and we are going to attempt to live stream that. We did some practice runs on Sunday, which were somewhat successful, so hopefully that works. And there'll be an intermission in between that she'll be available to answer questions, and then afterwards we'll be available again for questions. So super excited about that. And then you mentioned earlier that next week we are interviewing Raven, who is Jadwiga in the SCA.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jadwiga. I forgot your SCA name.
Said it correctly and I did not. So
Facebook has ruined us all, is what's happened.
And she's another person who you know is an incredible artist and fighter and does service, and somebody that I think Rifkin knows her, but I have admired her from afar for quite a while, and so I'm really excited about that interview.
I know her because we both fight, but I wouldn't say that I wouldn't learn a whole bunch talking to her.
So that's going to be super fun, and I haven't put up the event or the flyer for that yet, but I will try to get to that tonight.
Very cool.
And then next, that's the last interview for this month, and next month we are going to start interviewing Ontir's barons and baronesses.
The unsung heroes of the pandemic.
Yeah, they have been really carrying our kingdom, and we are starting September off with a solid 5. And I don't think that, I mean, we knew, but I don't think we really thought about the fact that we have 17 baronies in this kingdom. And that's 4 months of interviews. So we're starting off with 5, and then we'll be alternating.
Sprinkling them in.
Yeah. So, so that's what we have coming up. Thanks everyone for hanging out with us. Rifkin, do you have any closing words?
No, thank you, Rotrude. I learned so much about you, and it's very cool. I mean, we live in the same barony, but like she said before, geographically, it has its obstacles from actually being a close-knit community, and I learned a ton, and that was very cool. So,
thank you. All right, everybody. Good night. See you next time.